Oh, you know this is gonna be brutal. I'm Brutally Hannes, and I'm just dying to talk to you about Godzilla King of the Monsters. It's the sequel to Godzilla 2014, the third installment in the Monsterverse, and the industrial lubricant on my slope into alcoholism. I'll be going through the plot with a fine-tooth comb to see what went wrong. Like many Godzilla fans, I was happy to see my boy back on the big screen again, but something about the movie left me with a bad aftertaste. Something's rotten in the Monsterverse, and I'ma go looking. My goal in making this review was to find out whether I liked the movie or not, and trust me, I got my answer in spades. I'm always looking for feedback, so feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. That being said, let's dive right in. Let's start right with the opening logos. The screen shakes with each of Godzilla's footsteps. As we fade to black, his roar pierces the darkness. This roar sounds like an amalgamation of the classic Godzilla roar, along with the modern. This was the first indicator to me that this movie would be more faithful to the spirit of Godzilla, and it made me hopeful. I think we're all looking for a movie about monsters without too much humans getting in the way. More on that later. We begin with a flashback to the events of Godzilla 2014 in San Francisco, shown from the perspective of the Russell family. Though the parents and daughter survive, their young son is lost during the carnage. We also get our first glimpse of Godzilla, and I found myself finally being certain I was a rubber suit fan. Not that this isn't a good Godzilla design, but it's just not my cup of tea. I grew up watching Godzilla films, and though I appreciate the amount of time, effort, and money that went into making this CGI Godzilla, one of my favorite aspects of the Toho films was the amount of effort and artistry that went into the construction of the miniatures. To me, Godzilla's brought more to life when he's able to physically interact with his environment. I'd rather see him pummel a miniature with his bare fist as opposed to seeing him digitally applied in front of a barren CGI background, or obscured by darkness. Of course, this is a personal preference of mine. Besides, my favorite Godzilla film was done with mostly CGI, so I can accept both. Only 3 years before King of the Monsters hit theaters, Toho released their own film, Shin Gojira. If you haven't seen it yet, I can't recommend it highly enough as a Godzilla fan. In fact, I recommend you watch it before watching the rest of this review, because I'll be referencing it multiple times. Shin Gojira is a grounded and well-made monster film that seamlessly blends CGI as well as classic Godzilla miniatures, and is a true representation of the spirit of the Godzilla franchise. It doesn't try to go too big, and maintains an air of realism to a giant monster attack. With a budget only a tenth of this film's, it accomplishes so much more. Of course, this is only my opinion, and I won't fault this film for going its own way. Legendary needed to make its own version of Godzilla, and it's always interesting to see a new take on the monster. Though I will say that for a Godzilla film, we don't get as much Godzilla carnage as we should. Godzilla as a character has always been a force of nature that mankind is powerless against. In the Toho films, he's a consequence of nuclear testing, and therefore needed to display the destruction of an atomic bomb. Because of this, the previous films allowed some time for him to demonstrate that power by destroying whatever got in his way. Bridges, dunzo. Buildings, dunzo. Oh, look, a gas tank. Dunzo! Him being the living embodiment of destruction is what made him a legend, and ironically, in the legendary take on the character, this carnage is more subdued. Being a force of nature that can bring about great destruction is what gives him his god status, and yet we don't nearly get as much of that as we should from a film whose title reflects that status. Godzilla is the king of the monsters. A quick Google search tells me that monsters are defined as an imaginary creature that is typically large, ugly, and frightening. We've got large and ugly, but we're missing the frightening aspect. A creature that is so immense and powerful that it can kill your family unintentionally is frightening. This opening scene reflects this idea well, but the rest of the film tries to recontextualize this characterization. He is made out to be a big animal who's misunderstood, a creature with incredible destructive potential, though portrayed as having a kind heart. Basically, he's Harambe now. Remember him? See, the Godzilla I grew up with wasn't nature's balance. He was nature's vengeance, an abomination created by man's disruption of the natural order. He was a rogue tornado, not an enforcer of balance. He wasn't so much defending mankind from other monsters, but staking his claim. Now that I think of it, King Ghidorah in this film is more akin to the original character Godzilla was. Look, I mean, I understand this universe goes its own way, which is fine, but it's the change of themes that I found to be distracting throughout the film. I just want to cement this point by bringing up the first Godzilla film ever made, also titled King of the Monsters. In that film, which was made only a decade after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Godzilla was meant to be the living, fire-breathing manifestation of the atomic bomb. Toho has always kept this symbolism at the core of Godzilla's character. Godzilla has a personal relatability to the Japanese. An American audience would never be able to see him in the same context. Because of this, the legendary Godzilla has lost the origin that made him an icon. Anyway, back to the film, and we get an exposition dump from multiple news sources. It's been 5 years since Godzilla fought the Mutos, and protests are being held for the destruction of the Titans. There's also a quick mention of mass die-offs of species possibly being a result of mankind's search for Godzilla, who hasn't been seen since San Francisco.
Wait, what?
Species are going extinct because we're searching for Godzilla? How does that happen? Why would purely looking for something cause a separate species to go extinct? Did a bunch of dolphins get killed when we went looking for the Titanic? Or are we to assume we're trying to dredge them up with giant nets that are killing thousands of fish in the process? I don't get it. Consider the fact that later in the film, we'll be shown that Monarch has an oil rig base monitoring Godzilla, and they even have his territorial path mapped out. So if they know where he is, why are they allowing other species to be wiped out by other government resources trying to find him? You know, if you're gonna put something like this in the movie, at least attempt to explain it. Or is this just another way the writers are trying to tell us, humanity is the disease, man? We are also shown that the secret organization Monarch has become public knowledge. How did that happen? I don't remember Monarch acting too conspicuously in the past film. They seem to be pretty good at remaining secretive too, considering they had Janjira blocked off for 15 years without any problems. Sure, Serizawa and Graham were following Godzilla's progress, but I just assumed that they were scientific observers studying this unique species. It's also stated that the top brass of Monarch were the ones being grilled. So are we to assume that Serizawa's running Monarch? Who is the Monarch of Monarch anyway? There must be someone running this massively funded, secretive branch of the government. Are they like Kaiju Treadstone, where the rest of the government isn't aware of their existence? I don't think so, based on all the manpower, equipment, and access they have throughout the entire film. It's almost like they're the benevolent First Order of the Monsterverse, a well-funded organization of thousands of members that spans multiple continents but with no explanation of how they're sustained. They even apparently have Snoke's Dreadnought at their disposal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And I don't care if this is explained in a book or in some third-party media. I already paid the price for my ticket. I don't want to pay an additional fee or spend hours reading online articles to comprehend the product I came to see. We now get a little time with two of our main characters, Emma and Maddie. We're shown they have a good mother-daughter relationship, though the father, Mark, is out of the picture. Emma mentions that she just completed her latest project. Remember that. Their character's conversation is interrupted by a massive tremor followed by a familiar monster cry. Mothra. I was pleased that they used the same classic cries used in previous renditions of the monster. Further proof this film was made by someone who is actually a fan of the series. How refreshing in this day and age. We're also introduced to the fact that this modern apartment they're living in is actually in the middle of the Yunnan rainforest in China.
Wait, what?
Is China aware of this faction of the American government having a base of operations on top of a hidden kaiju egg on their home soil? I mean, if the Americans don't know about their goings-on, then of course China wouldn't either. Having this base of operations exposed would cause a political firestorm, wouldn't it?
Oh my god.
And yet there is an entire settlement clear as day that can be seen from any passing plane. It looks like the rebel base from Yavin 4, and it's gone unnoticed for years? So much so that they even have apartment complexes set up for the staff and their families? Just how? So inside the temple, Emma is met by another scientist who informs her that the egg they've been studying just started stirring, as if triggered by something. We never find out what that is. Emma then tells the doctor to go get some rest. What? Hey bud, you know how you've spent the last 5 years of your life in a secret facility whose sole purpose is to monitor a mysterious giant egg? Well, now that it's hatching, you want to go catch some Z's? We'll tell you how it went tomorrow. The fuck? When I first heard this line, it was so incredibly distracting. However, it is later revealed retrospectively that since Emma knew what was about to happen, she was really trying to save this guy from having the back of his skull being fired through a bay window by Tywin fucking Lannister. However, in the moment, it's a total head-scratcher. Keep in mind, this is the same woman whose plan is to release all the monsters on the planet to eradicate mankind and bring balance. It reminds me of Revenge of the Sith, where Anakin is suddenly concerned with the safety of a single clone trooper in the opening battle.
They're all over me. I'm gonna go help them out.
It fills the same purpose in both cases. It's the writers trying to make out a character to have some nobility before they fall. This is also the first example in this film of events taking place and then later being recontextualized to the point of contradiction. So Emma and Maddie walk into the observation deck to see Mothra's egg in a containment unit. Almost immediately, the egg begins to hatch, and voila, we have worm baby Mothra. It's odd to me that while it's hatching, there are about a dozen soldiers on a narrow platform surrounding it. Like, what if this thing bursts out violently, showering the area with shattered pieces of egg? How about you all not just stand there like a bunch of doe-eyed dipshits and give it some room? So now that Mothra has been born, they immediately put up a laser defense grid around it. Wait, this universe has functional lasers? I wonder if they'll have any modified for military use. That perhaps could be useful in a world of kaiju, but this is the last we'll ever see of them. Also, the size of this laser cage would be like an Iron Maiden for poor Mothra. They turned it on while it was standing up, and it looks like that's all the room it has to work with. Gratefully, the lasers immediately shut down because they are being hacked externally. Now Mothra's there, pissed off, and those dozen guys with their clunky future rifles continue to stand directly in front of her as if they'll be any threat. Then, as Mothra looks down at one dude, he simply can't keep his shit together and screams at it. Yep, he just screams at it like Jon fucking Snow. You'd think they would have covered this kind of thing on day one at Monarch Academy. Don't provoke the Titans. But literally every time a monster awakens in this film, Monarch begins immediately shooting at it even though conventional weapons are utterly useless. Gotta justify the old Monarch budget, huh? So Mothra gets pissed and starts subduing all the guards, but non-lethally, which is how the Mothra we know would behave. Then Scientist Guy says they should terminate Mothra and puts his hand on a big red button, but Emma stops him. What would that button have done? Was it a self-destruct button? When he goes to press it, he doesn't have a look on his face like his life's about to end. He doesn't glance around the room at all the lives he's about to take. It seems like its main function is to terminate Mothra. Does it activate some type of weaponry? Is there some method they've developed that will absolutely kill a Titan? I mean, I sure hope they fucking have something like that. They've had 70 goddamn years to develop it. I like to imagine it's the golden egg machine in Willy Wonka. Like he'll press it and Mothra will just slide down a big tube to the incinerator.
She was a bad egg.
So the worm has turned red for some reason. And the only one who can stop it is Lorraine Warren with her creepy music box. And because the stakes weren't raised enough, Maddie runs out there to stand by her mom so they can become literal worm food together. Two main characters in extreme danger from the very hungry caterpillar in the first 10 minutes of the movie. Boy, I hope they make it. But luckily, Emma finds the one dubstep song Mothra likes. And they're all friends again. So what does this orca thing do? We're told the orca is meant to find alpha wave bioacoustics of the Titans and subdue them, but how? It seems to pacify them, but why? Maybe they'll explain more later? Then there's an explosion in the control room, and a bunch of bad hombres come running in, spraying bullets all over the place. They shoot every unarmed person in the room in a matter of seconds and make way for Tywin, who proceeds to turn the observation window into red stained glass in true villain of the week fashion. Consider that later on, we know Emma made this deal with Tywin to abduct her and her daughter, and he just up and decided to detonate and massacre the room they'd most likely be in. You think Emma would have been as cooperative if her daughter had been blown to smithereens? And I always assumed the explosion was used to blow open the door of the lab like a breaching charge. But watch the movie again. There's no door to the lab, just an open tunnel. So they really did just roll in a grenade and cross their fingers it wouldn't kill the key to their plan or damage the piece of technology they absolutely needed. Great writing. So Tywin walks up and there's a few moments of awkward silence where everybody's just kind of looking at each other, including Mothra. Keep in mind there's no way of knowing that Mothra would hatch in this moment, so this should be a shock to Tywin, but he just kind of looks on this worm like it's no big deal. Then again, I guess he did know Mothra hatched because his men hacked the laser containment. Why did he do that again? Mothra isn't part of his plan, so why not keep it contained so it can't interrupt him and his men? I guess the plot needed it to happen. Keep in mind that this is the first time ever that the Orca has been used, and it was barely able to succeed. It's revealed later that Emma's whole plan was to use Tywin and his bad hombres to help spread the Orca signal, but she only just discovered it worked a minute earlier in an event she couldn't have predicted. So Tywin was just going to attack an installation on Chinese soil, run by arguably the most well-funded American government organization, all so he could acquire a machine he wasn't even sure worked? How the fuck did Emma convince Tywin fucking Lannister to take her word on this? Maybe she conjured an appealing offer for him? Imagine if this Mothra event didn't happen, and the Orca didn't work. Then they would have flown to Antarctica, chiseled out Ghidorah, and just played dubstep over its lifeless corpse until they realized their plan was screwed from the start. Now look, by this point, some people might say I'm nitpicking or being too critical. It's just a monster movie, bro. Calm down. Sure, I understand the Godzilla series has had a history of campiness to it, but that doesn't justify lackluster effort on behalf of the writing. A film isn't doomed to be shitty just based on its genre, so I don't abide by the belief that just because this is a monster movie, I can't expect it to be well written. I've seen several kaiju films, like the aforementioned Shin Gojira, that can be very grounded and believable. But I get it. I know Godzilla has danced. I know he has flown. I know he is force sensitive. I know he's been raped by sentient KY jelly, but that's no excuse not to have competent writing. I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking this movie could have been better.
This film is perfect. Like, the balance that all of us are given as a cast.
The problems I had with it are mostly ones that can be fixed rather easily with just a little more thought and consideration, as well as living up to your own promises.
You know, it's not just about the fights. Those are hugely important. They're the reason that people are buying tickets, is to come see these fights, like a good, boxing match.
Of course, you can't please everyone. Just ask every woman I ever met.
Mister, my family will pay cash. Whatever ransom you're asking for, they'll pay it.
What the fucking motion is bad?
But there's something to say when I'm only at the beginning of the newest movie of a franchise I've loved for over 20 years, and I'm already getting the nutty flavor of a shit sandwich in my mouth. What's most important is that this movie is the movie that will attempt to set up rules and lore for the subsequent MonsterVerse films. This is not the time to half-ass the plot, but trust me, though we're only 10 minutes in, this gets worse. Much, much worse.